Little girl knocks on Mafia boss's door at midnight. Her words leave him frozen. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca De Luca's penthouse, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing within his empire. He stood, one hand pressed against the cold glass, the other clutching a crystal tumbler of aged whiskey. The amber liquid caught the dim light, much like the dangerous glint in his eyes as he watched the city below. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Another betrayal. Luca's jaw clenched as he read the text. 3 more of his men had switched sides. The whiskey burned down his throat as he drained the glass, but it did nothing to dull the edge of his anger. These days, loyalty seemed as scarce as peace in his world. Thunder cracked overhead, and memories of another stormy night flooded his mind. 5 years ago, the last time he'd seen her. Valentina. Her name still tasted like honey and poison on his tongue. The way she'd looked at him that night, her eyes full of secrets she wouldn't share. By morning, she was gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty bed and a hollow space in his chest where his heart used to be. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. He set the glass down on his desk with more force than necessary. The sound echoed through the empty penthouse. All marble floors and leather furniture, a monument to power and loneliness. Everything in its place, under his control. That's how he liked it. That's how he needed it to be. Lightning illuminated the city skyline, casting sharp shadows across his face. In that brief flash, his reflection stared back at him. Perfectly tailored suit, carefully styled dark hair, eyes that had grown colder with each passing year. At 28, he'd built an empire that men twice his age feared. But power came with a price, and lately, that price felt steeper than ever. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his security team. Another territory dispute on the west side. More blood would be spilled tonight. Luca's fingers tightened around the phone as he read the details. His brother Enzo's name appeared in the report, and something dark and dangerous unfurled in his chest. The storm grew louder, drowning out the soft classical music playing in the background. Luca poured another drink, the bottle trembling slightly in his grip. Control. He needed control. The empire his father had built was crumbling from within, and he couldn't afford weakness. Not now. Not ever. He turned back to the window, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. Each drop held a memory he'd tried to bury. Valentina's laugh, the softness of her skin, the way she'd look at him like he was more than just a killer with a crown. But memories were luxuries he couldn't afford anymore. The thunder rolled again, closer now. The storm was directly overhead, nature's fury matching his own. Luca loosened his tie, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down on his shoulders. In this world, trust was a currency more valuable than gold, and he was running dangerously low. A sound cut through the storm's chaos, so soft he almost missed it. A knock. Small, hesitant, coming from his penthouse door. Luca froze, his instinct screaming danger. Nobody came to his private floor without clearance. Nobody. He moved silently to his desk, pulling out his gun with practiced ease. The knock came again, barely louder than a whisper. Luca approached the door, weapon ready, years of survival instinct guiding his movements. When he opened the door, the gun nearly slipped from his grip. There, barely reaching his waist, stood a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Her dark hair was damp from the rain, and she trembled like a leaf in the wind. In her small hands, she clutched a crumpled envelope. She looked up at him with eyes he'd seen before, in another face, In another time. His heart stopped as she spoke, her voice soft but clear. Daddy sent me. The letter trembled in Luca's hands as he stood frozen in the hallway. His eyes scanned the familiar handwriting once, twice, 3 times, each pass making his chest tighter. Valentina's words blurred before him. She's yours, Luca. I've kept her safe all these years, but now she needs you more than ever. Sophia shifted beside him, her tiny shoes scuffing against the marble floor. The sound jarred him back to reality. He looked down at her, really looked at her, and his breath caught. How had he missed it before? Those eyes. His eyes. The same sharp angle to her jaw that he saw in the mirror every morning. When? The word came out rough, barely controlled. When did your mother give you this letter? Sophia clutched the stuffed rabbit in her arms tighter, pressing it against her rain-dampened coat. Yesterday, she whispered, her voice small but clear. Mommy said I had to wait until tonight. Had to wait for the storm. Luca's fingers clenched around the paper, nearly tearing it. 5 years. Valentina had kept his daughter hidden for 5 years. Every birthday, every first word, every moment he should have had, stolen. The rage built in his chest, threatening to explode. He forced himself to breathe, to loosen his grip on the letter. Sophia was watching him, those familiar eyes taking in every movement. She seemed to shrink smaller with each passing second, and something in Luca's chest twisted at the sight. Where is she? He demanded, struggling to keep his voice level. Where is your mother now? Sophia's bottom lip trembled. She said you'd keep me safe. Her small hands twisted in the fabric of her rabbit's ears. She said you're the only one who can. The words hit Luca like a physical blow. Valentina hadn't just hidden their daughter. She'd been sending him messages through her all along. The realization made him dizzy. How many signs had he missed? How many chances to protect them both had slipped through his fingers? He crouched down to Sophia's level, ignoring how his perfectly pressed suit pants met the floor. Did she tell you anything else? Anything about where she was going? Sophia shook her head, dark curls bouncing. A curl stuck to her damp cheek, and without thinking, Luca reached out to brush it away. She flinched slightly at his touch, and the motion sent another spike of anger through him. His daughter shouldn't fear him. His daughter shouldn't be a stranger. How did you get here? He asked, forcing his voice softer. A lady brought me, Sophia said. She had red hair. She showed me your picture and said this is where my daddy lives. She paused, studying his face with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. Are you really my daddy? The question knocked the air from his lungs. Luca stood abruptly, turning away from those questioning eyes. He wanted to deny it, to send her away, to return to his controlled world of power and certainty. But the truth was written in every line of her face, in the way she held herself, in the stubborn set of her tiny chin. Yes, he said finally, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. I am. The storm outside grew louder, rain lashing against the windows. Sophia jumped at a particularly loud crack of thunder, and without conscious thought, Luca found himself moving closer to her, his body automatically shifting to shield her from the sound. He looked down at her trembling form, at the crumpled letter in his hand, at the stuffed rabbit that had probably been her only constant companion. The fury still burned in his veins, at Valentina, at the circumstances, at himself. But he couldn't send her away. Not tonight. Not ever. Come, he said, his voice rough with emotion he refused to name. "You'll stay here tonight." Luca sat in his leather chair, the crystal tumbler of whiskey untouched on his desk. The study's dim lighting cast long shadows across the mahogany surfaces, matching his dark mood. His fingers traced the edge of an old photograph. Him and Valentina, both younger, both smiling. God, how she used to smile. 5 years ago, they had been happy. Or at least, he'd thought they were. Valentina had been different from anyone else in his world. She hadn't feared his power or coveted his position. She'd simply loved him, touched the parts of his soul he'd thought long dead. Their love had been a wildfire, passionate, all-consuming, dangerous. Then one morning she was gone. No note, no explanation. Just an empty bed and the lingering scent of her perfume on his pillows. He'd torn the city apart looking for her, used every connection, called in every favor. Nothing. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. The soft padding of small feet pulled him from his memories. Sophia stood in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. She'd changed into the clothes his housekeeper had found, an oversized t-shirt that hung like a dress on her tiny frame. Her dark hair was still damp from the rain, curling around her face in a way that was achingly familiar. "I can't sleep," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca's throat tightened. He should call the nanny, have her deal with this. He didn't know the first thing about comforting children. But something in her expression, lost, afraid, yet somehow trusting, made him wave her in. "Where's my mommy?" Sophia asked as she approached his desk. "She said she'd come back, but—" Her lower lip trembled. The question hit him like a physical blow. He had failed them both. Failed to protect Valentina. Failed to be there for his daughter. The weight of it pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. "I don't know, Piccola," he admitted, the Italian endearment slipping out unconsciously. "But I'm going to find her." Sophia climbed onto one of the leather chairs across from his desk, her feet dangling well above the floor. "She was scared," she said, hugging her rabbit closer. "She cried a lot when she thought I was sleeping." Each word was another knife in his gut. What had Valentina been running from? Why hadn't she trusted him enough to tell him? A knock at the study door interrupted his thoughts. Marco entered, his expression grim. His most trusted bodyguard had been with him through everything, including Valentina's disappearance. "Boss," Marco said, then noticed Sophia. His features softened slightly. "Little miss." Sophia watched him with wary eyes, but offered a small wave. "Sophia," Luca said, surprising himself with how gentle his voice could be. "Why don't you try to get some rest? The nanny will be here soon." Once she had padding away, Luca turned to Marco. "What did you find?" Marco's jaw tightened. "The woman who brought her, red hair, like the girl said, matches the description of Maria Rossi." "Valentina's old friend?" Luca leaned forward. "Track her down. Now." "There's something else," Marco hesitated. "Some of the things we found back then about why Valentina left. I don't think we got the whole story." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe she didn't leave by choice." Marco met his eyes steadily. "Maybe someone made her disappear." Luca shot to his feet, his hands flat on the desk. "Impossible. I would have known. Nothing happens in this city without me knowing." "Boss, no!" The word came out sharp, final. "Find Maria. Find out what she knows about Valentina. That's all. Marco nodded and left, but his words lingered in the air like smoke. Luca's gaze fell back to the photograph on his desk. He would find the truth, whatever it was. He owed Valentina that much. He owed their daughter that much. Morning light filtered through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Luca's footsteps echoed through the quiet space as he emerged from his bedroom, his shirt already crisp and perfectly pressed, despite the early hour. He stopped short at the sight before him. Sophia lay curled on the leather couch, her small form dwarfed by the massive piece of furniture. Her stuffed rabbit was clutched tightly to her chest, dark lashes resting against pale cheeks. Someone, probably his housekeeper, had draped a blanket over her. Something shifted in his chest, an unfamiliar ache that made his throat tight. She looked so vulnerable, so innocent. How many times had Valentina held her like this? How many moments had he missed? He approached quietly, studying her features. She had Valentina's nose, her delicate bone structure. But those eyes, when they were open, were all his. The same steel gray that stared back at him from every mirror. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Without looking, he knew it would be business. It always was. The family empire didn't stop for personal crises. But for the first time in years, he hesitated before reaching for it. "Mr. DeLuca?" His housekeeper, Mrs. Romano, appeared in the doorway. "I've prepared breakfast, and the nanny service you requested will be here within the hour." He nodded, his voice low to avoid waking Sophia. "Make sure they understand the security protocols. No one enters or leaves without clearance. And I want background checks on everyone who comes near her." "Of course, sir." Mrs. Romano hesitated. "If I may, she's a sweet child. Last night she was crying for her mother." Luca's jaw tightened. The mention of Valentina still felt like a fresh wound. "Handle it," he said curtly. "That's what we're paying the nanny for." On the couch, Sophia stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion crossing her face before recognition set in. She sat up slowly, the blanket pooling around her waist. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice still thick with sleep. Luca stood frozen, unsure how to respond to such a simple greeting. In his world, mornings usually began with reports of violence, territory disputes, or betrayal, not with sleepy children and stuffed rabbits. "There's breakfast," he managed, "and someone coming to look after you." Sophia's face fell slightly. "You're leaving?" "I have work." The words came out harsher than he intended. He softened his tone. "The nanny will take good care of you." His phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. A message from his underboss. Trouble with the Russians on the docks. His two worlds were colliding. The brutal reality of his position and this new role thrust upon him. Sophia slid off the couch, her small feet barely making a sound as they hit the floor. She looked up at him with those gray eyes, his eyes, and something inside him cracked. "You'll come back?" she asked. The question hit him like a physical blow. How many times had she asked Valentina the same thing? How many promises had been broken? "Yes," he found himself saying. "I'll come back." Mrs. Romano appeared again, ushering Sophia toward the kitchen with promises of pancakes. Luca watched them go, his mind racing. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something he could delegate or avoid. Sophia was his daughter, his blood. In his world, that meant everything. It meant protection, responsibility, legacy. It meant she was now a target for every enemy he'd ever made. The phone buzzed a third time. The Russians wouldn't wait. His empire needed its king. But now, for the first time, the crown felt heavier. Every decision, every move he made would affect not just his business, but the small girl eating pancakes in his kitchen. There was no going back, no undoing this truth. Sofia was part of his life now, for better or worse. He would have to find a way to be both. The ruthless boss his position demanded, and the father this child needed. Luca's office was a testament to power. Dark mahogany, Italian leather, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he controlled. Today, that carefully crafted atmosphere was disrupted by a small pink backpack and a stuffed rabbit propped against his desk. Sofia sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, coloring in a book Mrs. Romano had found. The scratch of her crayons mixed with the soft hum of his laptop. Every few minutes, his eyes would drift to her, still unable to fully process her presence in his world. The letter from Valentina lay open on his desk. He'd read it so many times, the paper had started to wear at the creases. Her familiar handwriting brought back memories he'd tried to bury. Stolen moments in his villa by the coast, whispered promises. The way she'd look at him like he was more than just a criminal with blood on his hands. "My dearest Luca," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then something has happened to me. Sofia is our daughter. I've kept her hidden to protect her, to protect you both. There are things you don't know, dangers closer than you realize. Trust no one. Look for my messages in Sofia's things. I'm sorry for everything. V." Luca ran his fingers over the words. Valentina had always been clever, strategic. If she'd hidden messages, they wouldn't be obvious. His gaze fell on Sofia's backpack. He'd had his men check it for tracking devices or bugs, but perhaps they should look deeper. "Sofia," he called softly. She looked up, crayon paused mid-stroke. "Did your mother give you any special toys? Things she said were important?" Sofia nodded, reaching for her backpack. She pulled out a worn notebook filled with children's drawings. "Mama said to keep this safe. She used to write in it at night when she thought I was sleeping." Luca's heart raced as he took the notebook. The pages were filled with typical childhood scrawls, houses, flowers, stick figures. But between them, in nearly invisible ink, were numbers. Coordinates? Dates? His mind worked to decode the pattern. "Mr. DeLuca," Marco's voice came through the intercom. "The morning reports are ready. Send them in." Sofia watched curiously as Marco entered, carrying a stack of papers. The bodyguard's usually stern expression softened slightly at the sight of her. "Our contacts report unusual activity in the south side," Marco said, keeping his voice low. "Several of Enzo's men have been seen meeting with the Russians. They're being careful, but not careful enough." Luca's jaw tightened. His brother had been pushing boundaries lately, testing limits. But this felt different. The timing. "There's more," Marco continued. "We found records of payments, large ones, dating back to when Miss Valentina disappeared. All traced back to shell companies we now know belong to your brother." The pieces started falling into place. Enzo had always been jealous of Luca's position, his power, and Valentina. She'd known something. Something big enough to make her run, to hide their child. Sofia hummed softly as she colored, oblivious to the tension building in the room. Luca watched her, seeing hints of Valentina in every movement. How much danger had they been in? How long had Enzo been plotting? "Increase security," Luca ordered. "I want eyes on every move my brother makes. And get me everything we have on his activities from the past 5 years. Everything." Marco nodded, understanding the gravity in his boss's tone. As he turned to leave, Sophia looked up from her coloring book. "Marco?" she called. "Will you tell Mrs. Romano I'm hungry?" The bodyguard's face softened again. "Of course, little one." Alone again with Sophia, Luca returned to the notebook. Between the childish drawings and hidden numbers, Valentina had left him a trail. He would follow it, no matter where it led. He owed her that much. He owed Sophia that much. His daughter continued coloring, safe in her innocent world for now. But Luca knew. If his suspicions about Enzo were correct, that innocence was in danger. And he would burn the whole city down before he let anyone hurt her. The sharp rap at the door cut through the office's silence. Sophia's crayon clattered to the floor, her small body tensing like a frightened animal. Luca noticed how her shoulders hunched, how her eyes darted to the window, instincts taught by years of hiding. "Stay where you are," Luca commanded softly, moving toward the door. His hand brushed against the gun holstered beneath his jacket, a familiar comfort. The man on the other side wasn't one of his regular associates, shorter than Luca, with nervous eyes and a poorly fitted suit that screamed messenger. Not a threat himself, but his presence here meant trouble. "Mr. DeLuca." The man's voice wavered. He thrust out an envelope with trembling fingers. "I was paid to deliver this personally." Luca's jaw tightened as he took the envelope. Heavy paper, no markings. Professional. Expensive. The kind of thing someone would use when they wanted to make an impression. Behind him, he heard Sophia's quiet whimper. The sound ignited something primal in his chest, a surge of protective rage he hadn't felt since Valentina. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Recent, taken through a telephoto lens. Sophia sleeping on his penthouse couch, vulnerable and unaware. On the back, written in elegant script, "She looks just like her mother, doesn't she? Would be a shame if she disappeared too." The paper crumpled in Luca's fist. His other hand shot out, grabbing the messenger by his collar and yanking him inside. The man stumbled, terror clear on his face as Luca slammed him against the wall. "Who sent this?" Luca's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. I don't..." The messenger's eyes darted to Sophia, who had pressed herself into the corner, watching with wide eyes. "Please, I'm just the messenger." Luca's grip tightened. Wrong answer. He pressed harder, watching the man's face turn red. "Try again." "I got the job through my usual contact," the messenger wheezed. "But the money, it came from someone inside the family, someone with access." "Names," Luca demanded. The messenger's eyes darted around, looking anywhere but at Luca. "I can't. They'll kill me." "I'll kill you right now if you don't talk." Luca pulled out his gun, pressing it under the man's chin. Behind him, Sophia let out a small gasp. The messenger broke. "The orders came through Vincent, but everyone knows he works for your brother now. Enzo's been gathering support, making moves. This is just the beginning." Of course. Enzo. His brother had always wanted more. More power, more control, more respect. And now he had proof that Luca had a weakness. A daughter. Leverage. Luca released the messenger, who slumped against the wall, gasping. "Get out. If I see you again, you won't walk away." The man scrambled for the door, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. Luca turned to Sophia, who still huddled in the corner. Her eyes were fixed on his gun, and for a moment he saw himself as she must see him. Dangerous, violent, scary. He slowly tucked the weapon away. "Sophia," he said softly, kneeling down to her level. Did your mother ever mention my brother? A man named Enzo? She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. She said he was a bad man, that he wanted to hurt us. That's why we had to hide. The pieces clicked into place. Valentina's disappearance, the years of silence, Sophia's careful training to stay hidden. It all led back to Enzo. His own brother had been hunting them, threatening them, forcing them to live in fear. Luca reached out, hesitant, and Sophia surprised him by taking his hand. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his, trusting despite what she'd just witnessed. The touch sent a surge of determination through him. His brother wanted a war? Fine. But Enzo had made a fatal mistake. He'd threatened the only family Luca had left. And Luca De Luca protected what was his. The marble halls of the De Luca family mansion echoed with Luca's determined footsteps. Family portraits lined the walls, generations of De Luca men who had built their empire through blood and cunning. His brother Enzo's office door stood at the end of the hallway, a barrier between truth and deception. Luca didn't knock. He never did, not in his own house. The heavy oak door swung open to reveal Enzo lounging behind their father's antique desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Always the picture of casual elegance, even when plotting betrayal. Brother, Enzo's smile didn't reach his eyes. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Luca tossed the crumpled photograph onto the desk. Care to explain this? Enzo barely glanced at it, taking another sip of whiskey. Am I supposed to know what this is about? Cut the act. Luca's voice was steel wrapped in silk. The threats, the surveillance, the messenger, it all leads back to you. Does it? Enzo raised an eyebrow, setting down his glass. Or perhaps you're seeing conspiracies where there are none. Parenthood making you paranoid, brother. The casual mention of Sophia made Luca's blood boil. He pressed his palms flat against the desk, leaning forward. Your man Vincent sent the messenger. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Vincent? Enzo laughed, but there was an edge to it. He works for half the families in the city. If he's involved in something, that's hardly my concern. You've always been a good liar, Enzo. Luca straightened, studying his brother's face. But I know you. I see the truth in your eyes. The same look you had when we were kids and you'd break something valuable. Always so quick to deny, to deflect. Enzo's smile faltered for just a moment. We're not children anymore, Luca. And you're not father to lecture me about right and wrong. No, I'm not father. Luca's voice dropped lower. I'm worse, because father would have given you the benefit of the doubt. I won't make that mistake. Threats, brother? Enzo stood, matching Luca's stance. Over what? A photograph? A scared messenger with an unreliable story. You're losing your edge. The tension crackled between them like lightning before a storm. Two predators circling, each waiting for the other to show weakness. Tell me about Valentina, Luca demanded suddenly. The name hung in the air like smoke. Enzo's face remained carefully neutral, but his fingers twitched against the desk. Ancient history. Why dig up old graves? Because those graves might not be as deep as we thought. Luca watched every micro-expression that crossed his brother's face. She was alive all these years, Enzo. Hiding, running. The question is, from what? Or from whom? Enzo countered smoothly. Have you considered, brother, that she might have been running from you? Your reputation isn't exactly gentle. She wouldn't have sent Sophia to me if that were true. Ah, yes, the child. Enzo's smile turned cruel. Such a precious thing, family. So fragile. Luca moved before he could stop himself, grabbing Enzo's collar and yanking him forward. If you go near her, you'll what? Enzo didn't resist, calm demeanor a stark contrast to Luca's rage. Kill your own brother? Over suspicions and paranoia? Luca released him with a shove, disgusted. You're not denying anything. I'm not confirming anything either. Enzo straightened his jacket with practiced ease. But let me give you some brotherly advice. Some things are better left buried. Some truths aren't worth uncovering. Is that a threat? Consider it a warning. Enzo gathered his things, preparing to leave. Family is complicated enough without adding ghosts to the mix. He paused at the door, looking back at Luca with an expression that could almost be mistaken for concern. Take care of that little girl, brother. The world is full of dangers, even ones you don't see coming. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Luca alone with his thoughts and the damning photograph. His brother's words weren't a denial. They were a challenge. A declaration of war wrapped in family concern. Luca picked up the photograph, studying Sophia's innocent face. Whatever game Enzo was playing, whatever truth he was hiding about Valentina, one thing was certain. Luca would tear apart heaven and hell to protect his daughter. And if that meant destroying his own brother in the process, so be it. Luca DeLuca stared at the bowl of cereal growing soggy on the kitchen counter. He'd never had to think about things like children's breakfast before. Sophia sat quietly at the massive dining table, her legs dangling from the chair, looking impossibly small in the grandiose room. You need to eat, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Sophia poked at the cereal with her spoon. Mommy always cut up strawberries. The mention of Valentina made his chest tighten. Without a word, he went to the refrigerator, found strawberries, and began slicing them methodically. His hands, used to handling weapons and signing death warrants, felt clumsy with this simple domestic task. He placed the fruit beside her bowl, watching as her small face lit up. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her since she arrived. Throughout the day, Luca found himself doing things he never imagined. He approved contracts for millions while simultaneously ordering child-sized bedding for the spare room. He threatened a rival family over territory disputes, then spent 15 minutes trying to find Sophia's missing stuffed rabbit. When evening came, he stood awkwardly in the doorway of what was now Sophia's room. The nanny had helped her bathe and change into pajamas, but she refused to sleep until Luca came to say goodnight, a routine she'd apparently established with Valentina. The covers, Sophia whispered, pointing at her feet where the blanket had come loose. Luca approached cautiously, as if she were a wild animal that might startle. His large hands carefully tucked the blanket around her tiny form. The action stirred something deep inside him, a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. Daddy? The word made him freeze. It was the first time she'd called him that since arriving. Yes? He managed to keep his voice steady. Can you check for monsters? The irony wasn't lost on him. He was the monster other men feared, yet here he was, about to search under a bed for imaginary creatures. He did it anyway, making a show of looking in the closet and behind curtains. All clear, he reported, and Sophia's shoulders relaxed. The next morning, he found himself canceling a meeting to take her shopping for clothes. The nanny had informed him that Sophia had arrived with barely anything. In the store, he watched as she gravitated toward pink dresses and sparkly shoes, things so removed from his world of darkness and violence. "This one?" She held up a dress with butterflies. "If you want it." He nodded, trying to mask how out of place he felt among the children's clothing. That evening, after a dinner where he actually sat at the table with her instead of working in his office, Sophia followed him to his study. She clutched her rabbit, watching as he reviewed documents. "Can I stay here?" she asked quietly. He should send her to bed. Instead, he found himself clearing a space on the leather couch, where she curled up with her stuffed animal. The silence was comfortable until Sophia's small voice broke it. "Are you going to leave too?" Luca's pen stopped moving. He looked up to find her big eyes fixed on him, filled with a fear no child should know. "Like Mommy did?" she added, her lower lip trembling. The question hit him like a physical blow. He'd been keeping his distance emotionally, telling himself it was safer that way. But looking at her now, this tiny, vulnerable piece of himself and Valentina, he felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. His throat tightened. The great Luca de Luca, who could face down armies without flinching, found himself speechless before a 4-year-old's simple question. The weight of her fear, her need for reassurance, pressed against his chest like a vice. For the first time since she arrived, he truly saw her not as an obligation or a complication, but as his daughter, a child who had already lost one parent and was terrified of losing another. Luca sat in his black Mercedes, watching the small cafe where Maria, one of Valentina's old friends, worked. He'd spent the morning making calls, pulling strings, and threatening people to get information about anyone who might know about Valentina's disappearance. The early afternoon crowd thinned out, leaving the cafe nearly empty. Perfect timing. He adjusted his suit jacket and stepped out of the car, nodding to Marco, who remained vigilant behind the wheel. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Maria looked up from wiping down tables, her face draining of color when she recognized him. She wasn't the same vibrant woman who used to laugh with Valentina at parties. Time had aged her harshly, worry lines etched deeply around her eyes. "Mr. De Luca," she stammered, clutching the rag to her chest. I wasn't expecting—" "Sit." He pulled out a chair at the nearest table. It wasn't a request. Maria's hands shook as she lowered herself into the seat across from him. "I haven't seen Valentina in years, I swear." "But you did see her after she disappeared." Luca's voice was soft, dangerous. "The night she left." Maria's eyes darted to the door. Luca didn't move, but his presence seemed to fill the entire cafe. "She made me promise never to tell anyone." "She's in danger." Luca leaned forward. "Our daughter is with me now." "Sophia?" Maria's eyes widened. "Oh God, if she sent Sophia to you, something must be terribly wrong." "Tell me everything." Maria twisted the rag in her hands. "That night, she came to my apartment. She was terrified, said someone had threatened to kill her if she didn't leave you. She wouldn't tell me who, but she said it was someone powerful, someone close to your family." Luca's jaw clenched. "What else?" "She stayed with me for 2 weeks. She was already pregnant then, but I don't think she knew it yet. She kept getting these phone calls that would leave her white as a sheet. Then, one day, a black car started parking outside my building. The next morning, she was gone." Luca pulled out his phone, showing her a photo of Enzo. "Was he involved?" Maria stared at the picture, her hands trembling more violently. I can't." "Maria." His tone made her flinch. Your silence won't protect her anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. I saw him once, talking to the men in the black car. But it wasn't just him. There was someone else, someone bigger pulling the strings. Luca's mind raced. Enzo had always been ambitious, but he rarely worked alone. He preferred to align himself with more powerful players, letting them take the risks while he reaped the benefits. The other man, Luca pressed. Did you ever see him? Maria shook her head. But I heard Valentina mention a name once when she thought I was asleep. Salvatore Rossi. The name hit Luca like a physical blow. Salvatore Rossi controlled the largest rival family in the region. He'd been trying to muscle in on De Luca territory for years, and Enzo had always advocated for making deals with him instead of fighting. There's something else, Maria whispered. The night before she left, Valentina was writing letters, dozens of them. She said they were for you, that somehow she'd find a way to get them to you. She was crying, saying she had to protect both you and the baby. The pieces clicked into place. Enzo and Rossi had worked together, using Valentina as leverage. They'd kept her hidden, controlled, probably moving her from place to keep her away from Luca. But why? What did they gain by separating them? Unless they knew that Luca with Valentina would be too powerful, too stable, too happy. They needed him alone, isolated, focused only on business and power. They needed him vulnerable. Maria reached across the table, her fear momentarily forgotten in the face of his obvious pain. She never stopped loving you, Luca. Every time she mentioned your name, it was like she was talking about the sun itself. Luca stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He had what he needed. Salvatore Rossi, his brother's secret ally, the man who had helped tear his family apart. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's penthouse as he sat beside Sophia on the plush leather couch. Her small frame was wrapped in a pink blanket he'd bought her last week, her dark curls framing a face that reminded him so much of her mother. The same intelligent eyes, the same gentle curve of her nose. You want to know about your mama? Luca's voice was softer than usual, stripped of its usual commanding edge. Sophia nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit closer. Luca swallowed hard, his fingers tracing the rim of his whiskey glass. I met her at a charity gala. She was different from anyone I'd ever known. Not afraid of me, even though everyone else was. She'd challenge me, make me laugh. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She loved the garden at our family estate, would spend hours there planning where to plant new flowers. Sophia's eyes widened with interest. What color flowers? Purple ones, mostly. Lavender was her favorite. Luca closed his eyes briefly, remembering Valentina's delighted laugh as she'd shown him the newly bloomed stalks. She said they reminded her of peaceful things, of a life away from... He caught himself, remembering his audience. Away from complications. Did you love her? Sophia's question was direct, innocent, but it hit him like a physical blow. Yes, he answered, his voice rough. More than anything. Then why did she go away? The pain in his chest sharpened. I don't know, Piccola. One day she was there, planning our future, and the next... He set down his glass, fighting to keep his composure. The next day she was gone. No note, no explanation. Just gone. Sophia reached out, her small hand resting on his much larger one. The gesture was so unexpected, so gentle, that Luca felt something crack inside him. "She used to read to me," Sophia offered quietly. "Every night, even when she was tired." Luca turned his hand over, carefully holding Sophia's tiny fingers in his palm. "What did she read to you?" "Fairy tales, about princesses and dragons." Sophia's face scrunched up in thought. "But sometimes she would cry when she thought I was sleeping." The revelation hit Luca hard. He imagined Valentina, alone and afraid, trying to create a normal life for their daughter while carrying whatever burden had forced her away. The thought of her suffering, of both of them suffering, made his throat tight with emotion. "She was protecting you," he said, more to himself than to Sophia. "Everything she did was to keep you safe." "Are you going to protect me too?" Sophia's question held no fear, only curiosity. Luca looked down at their joined hands, at this small person who had crashed into his life and somehow begun to thaw the ice around his heart. "Yes," he promised. "Always." Sophia scooted closer, leaning against his side. The trust in the gesture nearly undid him. "Can you tell me more about Mama? About when she was happy?" So Luca talked, letting memories he'd locked away for years finally surface. He told Sophia about Valentina's love of old movies, how she'd dance in the kitchen while cooking, how her smile could light up a room. With each story, the weight in his chest both lightened and grew heavier. Lighter with the release of sharing these precious memories. Heavier with the acute awareness of all they'd lost. As Sophia's eyes began to drift closed, Luca found himself struck by how natural it felt to have her curled against him, trusting him completely. This child, his child, had somehow slipped past all his defenses, making him feel things he'd sworn never to feel again after Valentina's disappearance. The realization terrified him. He'd built his empire on control, on never letting anyone close enough to hurt him again. But here was Sophia, and with her, the ghost of Valentina, breaking down his walls brick by brick. The gunfire erupted without warning. Luca's instincts took over as he shoved Sophia behind his heavy mahogany desk. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. The little girl's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit. The first attacker burst through the office door, and Luca moved like a predator. His hand found his weapon with practiced ease, and the shot rang out before the man could even aim. The body dropped with a heavy thud. "Boss!" Marco's voice carried over the chaos. "They're coming from both sides!" Luca's jaw clenched. He could hear Sophia's rapid breathing from behind the desk, and it fueled his rage. These men had dared to bring violence into his sanctuary, where his daughter was supposed to be safe. Two more men charged in. Luca's movements were brutal and efficient. He grabbed the first one by the throat, using him as a shield while he shot the second. The crack of bone echoed as he snapped the first man's neck with a savage twist. "How many?" Luca demanded, his voice eerily calm despite the violence. "At least 10 more, Marco reported, covering the doorway. A flash of movement caught Luca's eye. Through the glass walls of his office, he could see men positioning themselves. They thought they had him cornered. They were wrong. The firefight that followed was devastating. Luca moved with lethal precision, each shot finding its mark. Blood sprayed across his expensive suit as he took down enemy after enemy. He fought like a man possessed, knowing his daughter was watching, knowing she was seeing the monster he truly was. One attacker got too close, and Luca's response was visceral. He drove his knee into the man's stomach, then slammed his head repeatedly against the wall until the struggling stopped. The brutality of it felt good. These men had threatened what was his. From behind the desk came a small whimper. The sound cut through Luca's bloodlust like a knife. Sophia had seen everything, every brutal moment, every death dealt by his hands. The last attacker tried to retreat, but Luca wouldn't allow it. He caught the man by the collar, dragging him back. "Who sent you?" he snarled, pressing his gun under the man's chin.
Please,
the man begged.
I was just following orders."
"Whose orders?" Luca's voice was ice. The man's eyes darted to the side.
"Your brother's."
Luca's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot echoed through the now quiet office. Blood dripped from his knuckles as he turned toward the desk. The silence was deafening. Bodies littered the floor, and the metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the air. This was his world. Violence, death, power. But now it wasn't just his world anymore. He moved slowly toward the desk, his steps careful. When he knelt down, Sophia was curled into a tight ball, her face buried in her knees. Her whole body trembled. "Sophia," he said softly, trying to gentle his voice. "It's over. You're safe now." She lifted her head, and the look in her eyes made his chest ache. Fear. Raw, undiluted fear. Not of the attackers, but of him. Of what she'd seen him do. "I had to protect us," he explained, reaching for her. She flinched, and the movement felt like a knife to his heart. "They would have hurt you." Sophia's lower lip quivered.
"You killed them," she whispered. "Like the monsters in my stories."
The words hit him harder than any bullet. He looked down at his blood-stained hands, seeing them through her innocent eyes. This was his legacy. Not just the power and wealth, but the violence and death. And now he was passing it on to her, tainting her childhood, just as his had been tainted. "I'm not," he started, but couldn't finish. Because wasn't he exactly what she said? A monster? The very thing he'd sworn to protect her from? Luca stared at the empty bed where Sophia should have been sleeping. Her stuffed rabbit lay abandoned on the floor, a silent witness to the violence that had occurred. His hands trembled as he picked up the toy, its soft fur now stained with blood. Not Sophia's, thank God, but from the nanny who'd tried to protect her. The woman lay unconscious in the hospital, beaten severely for her resistance. She'd managed to trigger the silent alarm, but by then it had been too late. They'd taken Sophia. "Boss," Marco's voice cracked with tension. "We found this." A letter, written in Enzo's flowing script, made Luca's blood run cold. "Brother, did you really think I wouldn't know about her? That I wouldn't use your weakness against you? Choose carefully what comes next." The paper crumpled in Luca's fist. Around him, his men shifted nervously, watching their boss with wary eyes. They'd seen him angry before, seen him violent. But this was different. This was pure, uncontrolled rage. "Get me everything." Luca's voice was dangerously quiet. "Every safe house, every contact, every rat hole my brother might crawl into. I want it all." His phone buzzed. Another message from Enzo. A video. Luca's hand shook as he pressed play. Sophia sat in a dark room, tears streaming down her face.
"Daddy," she whimpered, "I want to go home."
Enzo's voice came from behind the camera. "Tell him what I told you to say, little one." Sophia's lower lip trembled.
He says you have to give him everything. The family business, The territories? All of it. Or...
She broke into sobs. The video cut off. Luca hurled his phone against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces. The sound barely registered over the roaring in his ears. "Marco," he barked, "get the cars ready, all of them, and bring me my special case." The special case contained weapons that Luca rarely used, tools reserved for personal vendettas and intimate kills. Tonight, they would serve their purpose. As his men scrambled to follow orders, Luca stood in Sophia's room, taking in the signs of struggle. Her blanket lay twisted on the floor, her favorite books scattered. On her nightstand, the photo she kept of her mother stared back at him accusingly. "I'm sorry, Valentina," he whispered. "I failed you both." Reports started flooding in. His empire was already feeling the effects of Enzo's betrayal. Several of his captains had switched sides, taking their territories with them. The docks were in chaos. 2 of his warehouses were burning. Luca didn't care. Let it burn. Let it all burn. None of it mattered without Sophia. He strapped on his weapons with mechanical precision, each movement calculated and cold. His usual suit was replaced with tactical gear. Tonight wasn't about maintaining appearances. Tonight was about war. "Boss?" Marco returned, face grim. "We've got a location. One of Enzo's men broke under questioning. They're holding her at the old foundry." "How many men?" "At least 30, maybe more. They're expecting us." Luca checked his weapons one final time. Good. Then they can watch each other die. The drive to the foundry was tense. More reports of betrayal and destruction came in. Enzo had planned this well, attacking from all sides simultaneously. The empire Luca had built was crumbling around him. But as he watched the city lights blur past his window, Luca felt an odd sense of clarity. The empire, the power, the control. It had all meant everything to him once. Now it felt hollow, empty. What good was an empire if he couldn't protect one small girl? His phone rang, a burner this time. Enzo. "Brother," his voice dripped with false concern. "Have you made your decision? Time's running out." "Yes," Luca's voice was ice. "I've decided I'm going to kill you. Slowly. I'm going to make you suffer in ways you never imagined possible. And when I'm done, there won't be enough left of you to bury." Enzo laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty to it. "You always were dramatic. But this isn't about us anymore. This is about Sophia. Make the right choice." "I already have." Luca ended the call, nodding to his driver. The foundry loomed ahead, its abandoned structure a perfect fortress for Enzo's ambush. The foundry's shadows stretched like accusing fingers across the concrete as Luca moved through the abandoned building. The smell of rust and decay filled his nostrils, matching the rot he felt in his heart. His men spread out behind him, checking every corner, every possible hiding spot. A crunch under his boot made him pause. Bending down, he found a child's drawing, Sophia's distinctive scrawl. But something about it caught his eye. The date in the corner was from 2 years ago. "Marco?" Luca's voice was barely above a whisper. "Look at this." His right-hand man examined the paper, his face growing pale. "Boss, this isn't possible. 2 years ago?" Unless... The realization hit Luca like a physical blow. He remembered all the strange coincidences over the years, the way Enzo always seemed to know his weaknesses, his movements, the careful manipulation that had kept him distracted from investigating Valentina's disappearance too deeply. Another drawing lay a few feet away. Then another. A trail of Sophia's artwork, each piece dated from different times over the past 4 years. Luca's hands trembled as he collected them, his rage building with each revelation. He knew, Luca's voice cracked. All this time, Enzo knew about her, about Valentina. A laptop sat open on a desk in what must have been Enzo's monitoring station. Files upon files detailed Sophia's life. School records, medical visits, photographs. His brother had been watching her grow up, using her existence as leverage without Luca even knowing she existed. Videos played across the screen. Sophia at 2, taking her first steps. At 3, singing a nursery rhyme. Valentina's voice could be heard in the background, strained and fearful. Every moment of their lives had been under surveillance, controlled by Enzo's invisible hand. "Boss?" Marco called from another room. "You need to see this." The room was filled with evidence of Enzo's obsession. Photos covered the walls, surveillance shots of Luca, Valentina, and Sophia. Notes detailed every movement, every weakness, every possible pressure point that could be exploited. In the center, a timeline mapped out Enzo's long game, showing how he'd orchestrated everything from Valentina's disappearance to Sophia's arrival at Luca's door. "He's been planning this for years," Marco said quietly, "using them both to control you." Luca's hand traced a photo of Valentina. She looked terrified, holding a newspaper dated just 6 months ago. She was alive. All this time, she'd been alive and under Enzo's thumb. "The messages," Luca muttered. "The ones Valentina sent through Sophia. They weren't just warnings about danger. They were a cry for help. She was trying to tell me about Enzo." A burner phone on the desk buzzed. A text from Enzo. "Now you know, brother. How does it feel to realize you never really had any control at all?" Luca's fingers tightened around the phone until the screen cracked. Years of manipulation, of calculated cruelty. His own brother had kept his family hostage, using them as pawns in his twisted game for power. "He won't touch them again." Luca's voice was deadly calm. "I'm going to destroy everything he's built. Every connection, every ally, every breath of power he thinks he has. And then, I'm going to make him suffer for every tear Valentina shed, for every moment of fear Sophia felt." The evidence of Enzo's betrayal surrounded him, years of calculated manipulation laid bare. His brother hadn't just betrayed him. He'd tortured the people Luca loved most, turning their pain into a weapon. "Get everyone," Luca ordered Marco. "Every soldier, every asset we have left. This ends tonight." The weight of his brother's treachery settled over him like a shroud, but with it came clarity. This wasn't just about power anymore. This was about justice, about protecting what was his. Enzo had spent years carefully constructing this trap, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd given Luca something worth fighting for. The warehouse district loomed ahead, a maze of abandoned buildings perfect for hiding secrets. Luca's black SUV rolled to a stop 2 blocks away from the target location. His men, dressed in tactical gear, spread out in formation around him. Years of brotherhood had taught him to trust these soldiers with his life, but tonight he was trusting them with something far more precious. Marco handed him the thermal imaging readout. 20 guards, boss. Heavy artillery. They're expecting us." Luca studied the layout, his jaw clenched tight. Through the scope, he could see the guards positioned strategically around an old textile factory. Enzo had chosen well. The building was a fortress with limited entry points. "Sophia's heat signature?"
Luca's voice was barely above a whisper. "Third floor, east wing. Small room, probably an old office." Marco pointed to a tiny red dot on the screen. "One guard inside with her, two outside the door." The night air was thick with tension as Luca signaled his team to move forward. They'd trained for situations like this, but never with such personal stakes. Every second that passed was another moment Sophia spent terrified and alone. The first wave of his men took out the perimeter guards silently, garrotes and suppressors ensuring no alarms were raised. Luca moved like a shadow through the darkness, his rage carefully contained beneath years of discipline. Each step brought him closer to his brother's betrayal, to the final confrontation that had been brewing for years. A guard rounded the corner, and Luca's knife found its mark before the man could raise his weapon. Blood sprayed across the concrete, but Luca already moving.
The violence came naturally to him. It always had. But now it served a purpose beyond power or control. It was about protection, about family. Through his earpiece, Marco's voice crackled. "Boss, movement on the third floor. Enzo knows we're here." Gunfire erupted from above, shattering the night's silence. Luca's men returned fire, providing cover as he made his way to the service stairs. The metallic tang of blood mixed with cordite filled the air as he ascended, taking out two more of Enzo's men along the way. The third floor was chaos. Bullets peppered the walls as Luca's team engaged the remaining guards. Through the mayhem, he could hear Sophia crying. The sound cut through him like a blade, fueling his determination. "You've gone soft, brother," Enzo's voice echoed through the hallway. "Love makes men weak. I thought you knew that." Luca pressed himself against the wall as more gunfire erupted. "You never understood, Enzo. Love isn't weakness. It's purpose." He signaled his men to fall back, drawing Enzo's fire away from Sophia's location. The plan worked. He could hear his brother's footsteps following, couldn't resist the chance to confront Luca directly. They came face to face in what must have been the factory's main office. Enzo stood there, gun trained on Luca's chest, a cruel smile playing on his lips. The resemblance between them was striking, but where Luca's eyes held controlled fury, Enzo's blazed with madness. "Look at you," Enzo sneered. "The great Luca de Luca, brought low by a child. How many of your men died tonight because you couldn't let go of your precious little girl?" "How many died because you couldn't let go of your jealousy?" Luca countered, his own weapon steady. "Years of manipulation, of torturing Valentina, watching Sophia grow up, all because you couldn't stand being second best." Enzo's smile faltered. "I was never second best. I was smarter, more strategic. I played you for years, brother. Everything you thought you controlled was actually mine." The sounds of fighting grew distant as the brothers faced each other, years of resentment and betrayal hanging between them like poison. "You're right about one thing," Lucas said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Love changed me. It made me stronger. Because now I have something worth dying for." The gunfire echoed through the factory's hollow corridors as Sophia huddled in the corner of her makeshift prison. Her small hands covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. The guard who'd been watching her lay unconscious by the door, taken down by one of Luca's men moments ago. Through the chaos, she heard footsteps approaching, heavy, deliberate steps that made her heart race. Enzo appeared in the doorway, his usual charming smile replaced by something desperate and wild. "Come here, little one," he coaxed, extending his hand. "Your uncle will keep you safe from the bad men."
Sophia pressed herself further into the corner,
shaking her head. She might be young, but she understood more than they thought. She'd seen how Enzo treated her mother, how he'd kept them locked away for years. His smile never reached his eyes, not like Luca's rare ones did. "Don't be difficult now," Enzo's voice hardened. "Your father is a monster. You saw what he did to those men downstairs. He'll hurt you too, just like he hurt your mother." More gunshots rang out, closer now. Sophia flinched at each blast, but her eyes remained fixed on Enzo. She remembered the way Luca had tucked her in at night, how he'd let her sleep with the lights on when she was scared. He was dangerous, yes, but never to her. "Sophia!" Luca's voice boomed from the hallway. He appeared behind Enzo, gun raised, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Step away from her, brother." Enzo spun around, positioning himself between Sophia and Luca. "She's safer with me. I protected her all these years, while you were too busy with your empire to even notice she existed." "Protected?" Luca's laugh was cold. "You kept a prisoner. You threatened Valentina, forced her to hide her own child." Sophia watched the exchange, her young mind processing the tension between the brothers. Enzo had always been kind to her face, bringing her toys and treats. But she remembered her mother's tears, the whispered prayers late at night. "Sophia," Luca called softly, his eyes finding hers. "I know I wasn't there before. I know I'm not perfect. But I promise you, no one will ever hurt you again if you come with me." Enzo moved closer to Sophia, his movements becoming frantic. "He's lying, sweetheart. Remember all the fun we had? The games we played? I'm the only family you need." But Sophia saw through the act now. She remembered the locked doors, the whispered threats, the way her mother would tremble whenever Enzo visited. She looked at Luca, the father she barely knew, the man who'd shown her what real protection felt like. With a sudden burst of courage, Sophia darted past Enzo. Her small legs carried her across the room as fast as they could move. Enzo reached for her, but Luca was faster, stepping between them. Sophia crashed into Luca's legs, wrapping her arms around them tight. She felt his free hand come down to protect her head, shielding her from what might come next. Through her tears, she felt the tension in his body, the way he positioned himself to keep her safe. "It's okay, little one," Luca murmured, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I've got you now." The last barrier between them crumbled as Sophia pressed her face against his leg, feeling truly safe for the first time since her mother had sent her to find him. She didn't need to understand the complicated adult world of power and betrayal to know that she'd made the right choice. In Luca's protection, she'd found home. Blood dripped from Luca's knuckles as he handed Sophia to Marco, his most trusted guard. "Take her outside. She doesn't need to see this." His voice, quiet, but carried an edge sharp enough to cut steel. Sophia clung to Marco's neck, her small face buried against his shoulder as he carried her away from the coming storm. Enzo laughed, the sound hollow and bitter in the empty warehouse. "Look at you, brother. Playing daddy now?" He wiped blood from his split lip. "The great Luca de Luca, brought low by a little girl." Luca's jaw tightened. Years of betrayal, of manipulation, of hidden truths crashed through him like a tidal wave. Every moment Valentina had suffered, every tear Sophia had shed in captivity, every lie Enzo had told, it all led to this moment. "You kept them from me." Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "My daughter. The woman I loved." His fingers curled into fists. "You're no brother of mine." Enzo's charm slipped away, revealing the darkness that had always lurked beneath. Valentino was supposed to be mine, he snarled. Everything was supposed to be mine. Father always favored you, gave you everything, while I got the scraps. The first punch caught Enzo off guard. Luca moved with the fluid grace of a predator, years of contained rage finally finding its target. His fist connected with Enzo's jaw, sending him staggering backward. Enzo recovered quickly, pulling a knife from his jacket. The blade glinted in the dim light as he slashed at Luca. You don't deserve any of it, he spat. The family, the power, Valentina, you took it all. Luca dodged the knife, feeling it slice through his suit jacket. The physical pain barely registered. His world had narrowed to this final confrontation with the brother who had betrayed him in every way possible. They traded blows in the shadowy warehouse, their fight echoing off concrete walls. Enzo fought dirty, using every trick he knew. But Luca fought with something stronger than skill or training. He fought with the fury of a father protecting his child, of a man avenging years of hidden torment. Blood sprayed as Luca's fist connected with Enzo's nose. Where is she? He demanded between punches. Where's Valentina? Enzo's laughter turned to choking coughs. You'll never find her. She's gone where you can't follow, brother. His words dripped with malice. Just like you'll never be able to protect Sofia from what's coming. Something in Luca snapped. The careful control he'd maintained his entire life shattered. He grabbed Enzo by the throat, slamming him against the wall. The impact knocked the knife from his brother's hand. You threatened my daughter. Luca's voice was barely human. You kept her prisoner, used her as a pawn. Each accusation was punctuated with a blow. You hurt the only woman I ever loved. Enzo's face was a bloody mess, but his eyes still held that manic gleam. Kill me then, he wheezed. Prove what a monster you really are. Show Sofia what kind of father she's chosen. Luca's hand tightened around Enzo's throat. He could do it. End it all right here. But Sofia's innocent face flashed in his mind. He was her father now. Everything he did would shape her world. The final punch sent Enzo crashing to the floor, unconscious but alive. Luca stood over him, chest heaving, knuckles raw and bleeding. The warehouse fell silent except for his ragged breathing. Marco appeared in the doorway. Boss? Get him out of my sight, Luca ordered. Make sure he never comes near my family again. As his men dragged Enzo away, Luca walked outside where Sofia waited. The night air was cool against his blood-heated skin. She looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes, and something in his heart shifted permanently. He knelt down, ignoring the pain that shot through his battered body. Sofia threw herself into his arms without hesitation, and he held her close, feeling her tiny heart beating against his chest. In that moment, covered in blood and victory, Luca knew his life would never be the same. The cold, calculating Mafia boss was gone, replaced by something far more powerful. A father who would move heaven and earth to protect his child. The black SUV pulled through the iron gates of the De Luca estate, gravel crunching under its wheels. Luca sat in the back, Sofia curled against his side, her small hand clutching his blood-stained shirt. His body ached from the fight, but he couldn't bring himself to let go of her. Marco drove in silence, occasionally checking the rearview mirror. The familiar grounds of the estate emerged from the darkness, the mansion's windows glowing warm against the night sky. This place had always been cold to Luca, a symbol of power rather than home. But now
with Sophia's steady breathing beside him, it felt different. "We're home, Piccola," he murmured as the car came to a stop. Sophia lifted her head, studying the grand house with tired eyes. "Will we stay here now?" "Yes." Luca's voice was firm, certain. "This is your home now. No one will ever take you away again." Marco opened the car door, scanning the surroundings before nodding to Luca. Old habits died hard, especially now. The betrayal of family meant trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. Luca stepped out, lifting Sophia into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he felt her relax against him. The trust she placed in him was overwhelming. This child, who had seen his violence, his rage, still chose to hold on to him like he was her sanctuary. Inside, the house staff moved quietly, efficiently, having been warned of their arrival. Fresh towels, medical supplies, and a light meal had been prepared. But Luca bypassed it all, carrying Sophia straight upstairs to the room he'd had prepared for her days ago. The room was everything a little girl might want. Soft colors, plush toys, a canopy bed fit for a princess. He'd ordered it done even before he'd fully accepted her place in his life. Some part of him had known, even then, that she would change everything. "Is this my room?" Sophia asked, her eyes wide as she took in the space. "All yours," Luca said, setting her down gently on the bed. He knelt before her, ignoring the protest of his bruised ribs. "Sophia, look at me." She met his gaze, and he saw Valentina in her features, the same strength, the same quiet determination. "I need you to understand something," he said, choosing his words carefully. "What happened today? What you saw?" He paused, struggling to explain violence to innocent eyes. "You fought Uncle Enzo because he was bad," Sophia said simply. "Because he hurt Mama and me." Luca's heart clenched. "Yes, but I'm not—" He stopped, reconsidering. "I want to be better. For you." Sophia reached out, touching his bruised cheek with gentle fingers. "You saved me." 3 simple words, but they hit him harder than any punch. This was what it meant to be a father. Not just protection through violence, but the responsibility to be worthy of such pure trust. Marco appeared in the doorway. "Boss, the doctor is here." Luca nodded, but Sophia's hand tightened on his sleeve. "Don't go," she whispered. "I'll stay right here," he promised. "Let's get cleaned up, and then you can rest." As the doctor tended to their wounds, Sophia's minor scrapes, Luca's more serious injuries, Luca watched his daughter's eyes grow heavy with exhaustion. She fought sleep, still afraid to let him out of her sight. "Sleep, Piccola," he murmured, stroking her hair. "I'll be here when you wake up." Finally, she drifted off, her small hand still holding his. Luca remained there, ignoring the doctor's insistence that he needed rest himself. He had spent years building walls around his heart, protecting himself from attachment, from vulnerability. Now, those walls lay in ruins, destroyed by a child's unconditional love. The price of that love was high. It meant accepting weakness, acknowledging fear, learning to be something more than the cold, calculating boss he'd always been. But watching Sophia sleep, peaceful despite everything she'd endured, Luca knew he would pay that price 1,000 times over. Luca sat at his father's old desk, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished wood. The events of the past few days had changed everything, but the weight of the family business remained. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since word of Enzo's death spread through their circles. Marco stood by the door, sorting through reports. "The Rossi family is testing our hold on the docks. They think you're distracted." Luca's jaw tightened. He'd spent the night watching Sofia sleep, making sure she was safe. Now, it was time to remind everyone why the De Luca name commanded respect. "How many men have they moved?" Luca asked, his voice cold. 20, spread across 3 warehouses. They're not being subtle about it." "They want us to notice." Luca stood, straightening his suit jacket. "They want to see if we're weak." The door opened, and another of his captains entered, face grim. "Boss, the Rossis aren't alone. The Martinellis are making moves in the south."
Sighed. "They're saying—" He hesitated. "Saying what?" "They're saying you've gone soft. That the girl makes you vulnerable." Luca's fingers traced the edge of his desk. The same desk where his father had taught him that mercy was a luxury they couldn't afford. But his father had never known the love of a child, had never held something so precious it made everything else seem meaningless. "Call a meeting," Luca ordered. "Tonight. Every family head who matters. I want them all here." "Boss," Marco started. "Tonight," Luca repeated. He turned to the window, looking out over the city that had been his family's territory for generations. "And get me everything we have on Rossi's operation. Every dirty secret, every weakness." The day passed in a blur of preparation. Luca spent an hour with Sofia, making sure she was comfortable with her new nanny, a stern woman who'd worked for his family for decades. Then he immersed himself in work, piecing together the complex web of alliances and betrayals that had formed in the wake of Enzo's death. By evening, the mansion's grand meeting room was filled with the most powerful criminals in the city. The air was thick with tension and expensive cologne. These men had known Luca since he was a boy, had watched him rise to power, had feared him. Now they watched him with calculating eyes, wondering if the rumors were true. Luca made them wait. It was a power play his father had taught him. Let them stew in their own anxiety. When he finally entered, the room fell silent. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying to every corner, "I understand there have been some misunderstandings." Antonio Rossi, a bull of a man with graying temples, shifted in his seat. "No misunderstandings, Luca. We're just concerned about the stability of your leadership." "Concerned?" Luca's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Or opportunistic?" He moved around the table, his steps measured. "This morning the Rossi family moved men into my territory. The Martinellis thought they could take advantage of what they perceived as weakness." He stopped behind Rossi's chair. "But you've made a grave mistake." With a nod to Marco, screens around the room flickered to life. They showed surveillance photos, Rossi's son meeting with federal agents, the Martinelli warehouse where they stored their illegal weapons, bank statements showing money laundering operations. "You see," Luca continued, "while you were all watching me, thinking I was distracted by personal matters, my men were watching you. Every secret, every vulnerability, every skeleton in your closets. I have them all." The room was dead silent now. Rossi's face had gone pale. "My brother thought he could use my humanity against me. You all seem to be making the same mistake." Luca's voice turned to ice. "Having something to protect doesn't make me weak. It makes me more dangerous than ever." He pressed a button on his phone, and seconds later, explosions could be heard in the distance. Rossi jumped to his feet, but Marco's hand on his shoulder forced him back down. "That would be your shipment at the docks," Luca said calmly. "Consider it a warning. The next time any of you think about moving against me, remember this moment. Remember that I can destroy everything you've built without leaving this room." Luca stood in the doorway of Sophia's new bedroom, watching as she carefully arranged her stuffed animals on the pink bedspread. The room was everything a little girl could want: soft colors, twinkling lights, and shelves filled with books and toys. It was worlds away from the stark, militaristic environment he'd grown up in.
Papa?
Sophia looked up, clutching her favorite teddy bear.
Will you tell me a story?
The word Papa still caught him off guard, making his chest tighten with an unfamiliar warmth. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb her meticulously arranged animals. What kind of story would you like to hear? Sophia crawled into his lap, something she'd started doing more frequently since their return from the confrontation with Enzo.
Tell me about when you were little.
Luca's jaw tightened. His childhood stories weren't the kind meant for bedtime. They were filled with harsh lessons, expectations heavy enough to crush a young soul, and the constant shadow of violence. How about I tell you about what your future will be like instead? He suggested, running his hand over her dark hair, so much like her mother's. Sophia nodded, settling against his chest. Her small weight anchored him, reminding him that everything he'd done had been worth it. You're going to go to the best schools, he began, his voice soft but firm. You'll learn art, music, dance, anything that makes your heart happy. You'll travel the world, but not because you're running or hiding. You'll see it because it's beautiful and worth seeing. He could picture it so clearly. Sophia growing up without the weight of family obligations, without the constant fear that had shadowed his own childhood. She would never know what it felt like to be 14 and making your first collections, or 16 and learning how to dispose of evidence.
Will you come with me?
She asked, playing with the buttons on his shirt. Whenever I can, he promised. And when you're older, you'll go to university. You'll make friends, fall in love, build a life that's completely your own.
But I want to work with you,
Sophia protested, looking up at him with those innocent eyes that could break his heart. Luca shook his head firmly. No, Piccola, my work isn't for you. You're going to have a different life, a better one. One where you never have to look over your shoulder or wonder who you can trust. He thought about his own father, how he'd been groomed from birth to take over the family business. The lessons had been brutal, designed to strip away weakness and humanity. But looking at Sophia, he couldn't imagine hardening her that way. She deserved to keep her softness, her light.
Papa?
Sophia's voice was sleepy now.
Are you sad?
No, tesoro. He kissed the top of her head. I'm happy because you're going to have everything I didn't. You're going to be free. She snuggled closer, her breathing starting to even out.
I love you, Papa.
The words hit him like a physical force. Love had always been a weakness in his world, something to be exploited. But here, holding his daughter, he understood it was also strength. It was what had given him the power to face down his enemies, to reshape his empire, to become something more than just another brutal crime boss. Sophia's eyes drifted shut, but Luca continued to hold her, watching as she slipped into peaceful dreams. He envied her that peace, knowing it was something he would never fully know himself. His hands would always be stained with blood, his mind always calculating threats and advantages. But Sophia would be different. He carefully laid her down, tucking the blankets around her small form. The teddy bear found its way back into her arms, and she curled around it instinctively. For a moment, he just watched her sleep, this miracle he never knew he wanted until she knocked on his door that stormy night. The morning mist clung to the cemetery grounds like a gossamer veil, wrapping around the weathered headstones in ethereal wisps. Luca De Luca stood before Valentina's grave, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the marble marker. The bouquet of white lilies in his hands, her favorite, seemed too pristine for this place of endings. He knelt, placing the flowers against the cool stone. His fingers traced the engraved letters of her name, each curve and line a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd failed to protect. "I should have known," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "All those years, I should have seen the signs, should have realized Enzo." His words trailed off as anger and grief tangled in his throat. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and early autumn. It was the kind of morning Valentina had loved, cool and clear, full of possibility. She would have been out in her garden by now, tending to her roses with careful hands that could make anything grow. "Sophia has your smile," he continued, settling into a more comfortable position. "When she laughs, it's like hearing you again. She's so much like you. Strong, brave." He paused, a sad smile touching his lips. "Stubborn, too. Yesterday, she insisted on wearing her princess dress to bed. Reminded me of how you'd never back down once you'd made up your mind." The wind rustled through nearby trees, sending leaves dancing across the ground. Luca watched them, remembering how Valentina had always found beauty in simple things. She'd tried to teach him that too, but he'd been too focused on power, on control, on building his empire. "I failed you," he admitted, the words heavy with years of regret. "I was so caught up in the family business, in proving myself, that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. Enzo was always jealous, always plotting, but I never thought—" He clenched his fists, feeling the familiar rage rise up. "I never thought he'd hurt you to get to me." Birds called overhead, their songs a stark contrast to the solemnity of the cemetery. Luca reached out, brushing away some fallen leaves from the base of the headstone. "I promise you, Val, Sophia will have a different life. She'll never know the fear you lived with. She'll never have to run, to hide, to wonder if today is the day everything falls apart." His voice grew stronger, more determined. "I'm going to give her everything we dreamed of: safety, education, freedom. She'll have choices we never had." The sun was higher now, burning away the morning mist. Rays of light caught the dewdrops on the lilies, making them sparkle like tiny diamonds. Valentina would have loved that too. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Luca continued softly. "I should have protected you both. Should have seen through Enzo's lies. Should have found you sooner." He swallowed hard, fighting back the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "But Sophia, she's given me a second chance. A chance to do things right this time." He stood slowly, his hand lingering on the cool marble. The weight of the past still pressed against his shoulders, but it felt different now, less like a burden and more like a reminder. A reminder of what he'd lost, yes, but also of what he still had to protect. "I'll keep her safe, Val. I swear it. She'll grow up knowing she's loved, knowing she's protected." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "And she'll know about you, about your strength, your courage, your love. She'll know that her mother was the bravest person I ever knew." The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the cemetery grounds. Luca looked at the grave one last time, seeing not just the stone marker, but all the memories it represented. The love he'd found, lost, and found again in a different form through their daughter. With a final glance at the grave, Luca turned away. The morning light caught his face, warming it, as if Valentina herself was telling him it was okay to let go, to move forward, to focus all his love on their daughter. He walked away, knowing that while Valentina would always hold a place in his heart, his future, and Sophia's, lay ahead, not behind. The city sprawled beneath them like a glittering carpet, lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Luca De Luca stood on his penthouse balcony, his hand resting on Sophia's shoulder as she pressed against the railing, her small face filled with wonder at the view before them.
"Look, Papa, the lights look like stars."
Sophia's excitement made his heart clench. At 4 years old, everything was still magical to her, untainted by the darkness that had shaped his own childhood. "They do, Piccola." He squeezed her shoulder gently, studying her profile. In moments like these, she looked so much like Valentina it almost hurt. The same delicate features, the same bright, curious eyes that saw beauty in everything. The wind picked up, ruffling Sophia's dark curls. She shivered slightly, and without hesitation, Luca shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it around her tiny shoulders. The sight of her swimming in his expensive Italian wool brought an unexpected smile to his face. "Tell me about the buildings again," Sophia requested, pointing to the towering structures that made up his empire. Each one represented a piece of his family's legacy, legitimate businesses that fronted darker dealings, properties that had been won through blood and violence. But looking at them now, through Sophia's innocent eyes, Luca saw something different. He saw possibility, potential, a chance to transform his father's legacy of violence into something better. "That tall one with the glass windows?" He pointed to a sleek skyscraper. "That's where we'll build the new children's hospital wing." The plans were already in motion, a legitimate project that would help thousands of families. "And over there, that's where the new school will be." Sophia's eyes widened. "A school for kids like me?" "Yes, Piccola. For all children who need it." He'd already started redirecting his resources, moving away from the shadier aspects of his business. The transition wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But he was determined. A helicopter passed overhead, its rotors cutting through the evening air. Sophia watched it with fascination, but Luca tensed instinctively, his body shifting slightly to shield her. Old habits died hard. Even with Enzo gone, even with his position secure, the protective instinct never faded. "Papa?" Sophia's small voice drew him back from his dark thoughts. "Are you scared sometimes?" The question caught him off guard. He looked down at her, seeing the wisdom in her young eyes that sometimes made him forget she was only 4. "Why do you ask that, Piccola?" She shrugged, pulling his jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Sometimes you look worried, like now." Luca crouched down beside her, turning her gently to face him. In the past, he would have deflected, maintained the facade of invulnerability that had kept him alive all these years. But Sophia deserved better than his lies. "Yes, sometimes I get scared," he admitted softly. "Not for myself, but for you. I want to give you the best life possible, Sophia. A life different from mine." She reached out and touched his cheek, a gesture so tender it made his throat tight. "But I like our life, Papa. I like being with you." The simple statement hit him like a physical blow. After everything, the violence, the revenge, the blood that still stained his hands, this pure, innocent child loved him, trusted him, saw good in him when he struggled to see it in himself. The city lights blurred slightly as he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She smelled of baby shampoo and the chocolate gelato they'd shared after dinner.
her small arms wrapped around his neck, offering comfort she didn't even know he needed. "We're going to build something beautiful together, Piccola," he murmured into her hair. "Something that will help people instead of hurting them. Would you like that?" She nodded against his shoulder. "Can I help?" "Of course you can." He pulled back slightly, meeting her earnest gaze. Taking her tiny hand in his, he squeezed it gently. "We'll do it together. I promise you, Sophia. We're going to build a world filled with love and security. A world worthy of you." Luca watched Sophia's reflection in the massive window of his penthouse office, her small form curled up in his leather chair as she colored. Her dark curls fell forward, obscuring her face as she concentrated on her artwork. The sight of her there, in the place where he'd made countless brutal decisions, stirred something profound in his chest. Just months ago, this office had been a sanctuary of cold calculation. Now, scattered crayons and coloring books littered his mahogany desk, and a stuffed bear sat in the corner, Sophia's guardian when Daddy had to take important calls. "Papa, look!" Sophia held up her drawing, pride radiating from her smile. "It's us!" Luca moved closer, studying the childish scrawl. Two stick figures stood hand in hand, one tall in what appeared to be a suit, the other small with wild curls. Above them, a yellow sun beamed down on a house that looked suspiciously like his penthouse. "Beautiful, Piccola." He ran his hand over her head, smoothing back her hair. "You've captured my stern expression perfectly." She giggled, a sound that still surprised him with its ability to warm his cold heart. "You're not stern, Papa. Not anymore." The observation, so innocent yet so precise, made him pause. She was right. The ice he'd built around himself over years of betrayal and violence had begun to thaw the moment she'd appeared at his door. Moving to the window, Luca gazed out at his domain. The city sprawled before him, a testament to his power and influence. But now, that power meant something different. It wasn't just about control or revenge anymore. It was about protection, about creating a safe world for the little girl who changed everything. "Come here, Sophia." He held out his hand, and she scrambled down from his chair, running to him with complete trust. The weight of that trust still amazed him. Lifting her into his arms, he pointed to the cityscape. "What do you see out there?" Sophia pressed her small hand against the glass, leaving tiny fingerprints. "Buildings. Lots and lots of buildings. And lights." "Yes." He adjusted her weight against his hip. "But do you know what I see? I see your future. Every building, every street, every person out there, they're all part of what will one day be yours." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "Even the ice cream shop?" A laugh rumbled in his chest, deep and genuine. "Especially the ice cream shop." Setting her down, Luca moved to his desk and opened a drawer. Inside lay a small box he'd been saving for the right moment. "I have something for you, Piccola." Sophia's eyes lit up as he presented the velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold locket, custom-made by his most trusted jeweler. When she opened it, two pictures smiled back at her. One of Valentina, young and beautiful. The other of Luca himself. "So you'll always have us close to your heart," he explained softly, fastening it around her neck. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she touched the locket reverently. "Like Mama's special necklace?" "Yes, just like that." His throat tightened at the memory of the similar locket Valentina had worn,
the one that had contained the first message about Sophia's existence. Sophia wrapped her arms around his legs, pressing her face against him.
I love you, Papa.
The words, spoken so simply, hit him with the force of a bullet. How many men had he killed? How many lives had he destroyed? Yet here was this pure, innocent soul offering him unconditional love. Kneeling down, Luca gathered her close, breathing in her sweet scent. I love you too, Piccola, more than anything in this world. The setting sun cast long shadows across his office floor, but for once, Luca wasn't thinking about business or revenge or power. He was thinking about ballet lessons and school plays, about birthday parties and Christmas mornings, about all the moments he would never miss, all the memories they would create together. Sophia snuggled closer, her small body warm against his chest. The locket gleamed at her throat, a symbol of the past they honored and the future they would build. Together. The grand ballroom of the De Luca estate hummed with tension. 50 of Luca's most trusted soldiers lined the marble floors, their dark suits and stern expressions a stark contrast to the room's ornate beauty. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across their faces as they waited, wondering why their leader had called this unprecedented gathering. Luca stood at the head of the room, his presence commanding attention. The cut of his black suit was immaculate, but it was the slight softening around his eyes that marked the greatest change in him. Sophia sat quietly in a chair near Marco, her small legs swinging, the gold locket gleaming at her throat. Many of you have questioned my recent decisions, Luca began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. You've wondered if I've grown weak, if having a child has made me soft. His dark eyes swept across the assembly, challenging anyone to voice these doubts aloud. None dared. Let me be clear. He took measured steps forward, each footfall echoing. My daughter is not my weakness. She is my strength. His hand unconsciously touched the spot where he'd taken a bullet during Sophia's rescue. And anyone who mistakes my love for her as vulnerability will learn exactly how wrong they are. The men shifted uncomfortably, remembering the bloody aftermath of Enzo's betrayal. Luca's revenge had been swift and merciless, proving that fatherhood hadn't dulled his killer instinct. It had honed it to a sharper edge. I stand before you today not just as your leader, but as a father. His voice softened slightly as his gaze found Sophia. She smiled at him, innocent and pure, unaware of the weight of this moment. This changes nothing about how we conduct business, but it changes everything about why we conduct it. Marco stepped forward, presenting Luca with an ornate wooden box. The room held its breath as Luca opened it, revealing an ancient family ring, one that hadn't been seen since his father's time. This ring, he held it up, letting it catch the light, represents not just our family's power, but our legacy. For years I wore it thinking only of control, of dominance. He slipped it onto his finger, where it sat like a crown. Now I wear it for her, for the future I will build for her. The message was clear. His power hadn't diminished. It had found new purpose. Every man in the room understood that crossing Luca now meant facing not just a mafia boss, but a father protecting his child. Some of you have families of your own. You understand that there is nothing more dangerous than a parent protecting their child. His voice carried an edge of steel. To those who stand with me, who help me protect what's mine, I offer the same protection for your families. Your children will be under my guard, just as Sophia is. The promise hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was more than just words. It was a new covenant between leader and followers. Many of the men straightened, their loyalty cementing not just to their boss, but to this new vision of family. But make no mistake, Luca's expression hardened. Anyone who threatens my daughter, who even thinks of using her against me, will face consequences that will make Enzo's fate seem merciful. The room temperature seemed to drop at the mention of his brother's name. Everyone knew what had happened in that final confrontation, how Luca had shown no mercy, even to his own blood. This is who we are now. This is what we fight for. He gestured to his men. Not just power, not just territory, but family. Real family. As he finished speaking, the sound of small feet pattering across marble broke the silence. Sophia, unable to contain herself any longer, ran toward him. The hardened criminals watched as their fearsome leader's expression transformed, softening as he opened his arms to his daughter. The Italian garden stretched before them, a masterpiece of carefully trimmed hedges and blooming roses. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, casting long shadows across the marble fountains. Luca stood beside Sophia, his hand resting gently on her shoulder as they watched the day fade into evening. Sophia, now dressed in a pretty blue sundress, reached up to touch one of the roses. At 7, she carried herself with a grace that reminded Luca so much of Valentina. But the fierce determination in her eyes, that was all him. "Papa," she said, her voice carrying the slight lilt of an Italian accent she'd picked up over the past 3 years. "Tell me again about Mama's garden." Luca's heart squeezed at the request. These quiet moments with Sophia had become his salvation, his reason for leaving behind the violence that had defined his life for so long. The transition hadn't been easy. Old habits and old enemies died hard. But for Sophia, he'd moved mountains. "Your mother," he began, kneeling beside her, "loved roses most of all. She would spend hours here, tending to them herself, even though we had gardeners." He smiled at the memory. "She said some things were too precious to trust to others." Sophia nodded solemnly, her small fingers tracing the petals of a deep red bloom. "Like me?" "Exactly like you, tesoro." Luca pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "That's why she protected you so fiercely. Why she made sure you would find your way to me when the time was right." The garden had become their sanctuary, a place where the ghosts of the past seemed less haunting. Luca had transformed the estate, removing all traces of his former life. The hidden weapons, the secure rooms, the constant parade of dangerous men, all gone. In their place, he'd created a home worthy of his daughter. "Will you teach me to garden like Mama?" Sophia asked, her eyes bright with hope. Luca chuckled, a sound that had once been rare but now came easily. "I'm afraid I never learned, piccola, but we can learn together." He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. His expensive suits had long since been replaced with more casual attire, another change that marked his transformation from feared Mafia boss to devoted father. They walked along the stone path, Sophia skipping occasionally to keep up with his longer strides. The security cameras, hidden discreetly among the foliage, were the only reminder of their past. Some precautions, Luca knew, would always be necessary. But they were minimal now, just enough to ensure their safety without intruding on their peace. "Papa," Sophia said suddenly, stopping to look up at him. "Are you happy now, without the family business?" The question caught him off guard. Sometimes he forgot how perceptive she was, how much she understood despite her young age. Luca considered his answer carefully. "I am happier than I've ever been," he said honestly. "The business, it was never what I wanted. It was what was expected of me. He knelt again, meeting her eyes. But you, Sophia, you gave me the courage to choose differently, to be the father you deserve. She beamed at him, throwing her arms around his neck in a fierce hug.
I love you, Papa.
Ti amo anch'io, tesoro mio, he whispered, holding her close. The words, once so foreign to him, now came as naturally as breathing. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden. A cool evening breeze carried the scent of roses, reminding Luca of all they'd overcome to reach this moment. The violence, the betrayal, the loss. It had all led here, to this peaceful garden, with his daughter in his arms. Sophia pulled back, taking his hand in hers, her small fingers intertwined with his larger ones, a perfect fit. Together, they began walking toward the house, where lights were beginning to twinkle in the growing dusk. Their footsteps echoed softly on the stone path, father and daughter moving in perfect sync. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.